The rain on the roof was the only sound Minsu liked. It was steady and clean. It washed the noise of the city away. In his small workshop behind the house, the smell of old paper, glue, and leather was thick in the air. His hands moved slowly, carefully. He was repairing a poetry book from the 1920s. The spine was broken. His fingers smoothed down a strip of handmade paper, blending the old with the new. This was his world. It was quiet, predictable, and full of broken things he could fix. Outside Seoul, his house was small. It had a walled garden. The garden was messy with chrysanthemums and an old persimmon tree. It was his quiet place. His friend Ji-hoon from the city sometimes called him a hermit. Minsu didn't mind. The silence after his parents passed was not empty for him anymore. It was just space. Space to breathe. That night, the rain wasn't gentle. It was a hard, angry downpour. The wind shook the windows. Minsu finished his work and turned off the bright lamp. The workshop fell into darkness. He stood for a moment, looking at the black garden through the water-streaked glass. Then the world turned white. It wasn't lightning. It was a silent, blinding flash that made the shadows jump and freeze for a second. No thunder followed. Instead, there was a deep thud he felt in his chest, not his ears. It came from the garden. His heart beat fast. He thought maybe the old tree had fallen. He grabbed a large flashlight from a shelf and pulled on a coat. The back door groaned as he pushed it open against the wind. The rain hit him immediately. He pointed the beam of light into the garden. The flowers were beaten down. The tree was still standing. But in the far corner, his chrysanthemum bed was destroyed. It wasn't crushed flat. It was pushed outward, as if something had fallen very softly right in the middle. There was no metal, no fire. Just a shape. Minsu stepped closer, the mud pulling at his shoes. The shape was a person curled on their side. A woman. She wasn't moving. Panic, sharp and cold, shot through him. Had someone fallen from the sky? Was she hurt? "Hello?" he called, his voice stolen by the wind. "Can you hear me?" He knelt in the wet flowers, his pants soaking through instantly. He shined the light on her. She wore a simple, dark suit that looked too thin for the cold. Her skin was pale. Her hair, black as ink, was spread around her head. She looked like she was sleeping. Then he saw her face. It was beautiful, but in a way that made him feel strange. It was too perfect, too still, like a statue. There was no fear in it. Even in unconsciousness, he reached out a hesitant hand to check for a pulse on her neck. Before his fingers could touch her skin, her eyes opened. He jerked back, almost falling. Her eyes were wrong. They were a deep, dark brown, but within them, tiny points of light shimmered. They looked like stars seen from far away, or flecks of gold in old pottery. They focused on him with a clarity that was jarring. She took a slow breath. Her lips moved. "The signal is gone," she whispered. Her voice was clear, like a bell, and she spoke perfect Korean. But the words were odd. "This vessel is compromised. I require sanctuary." Minsu stared. Vessel? Sanctuary? This was not something a normal person said after falling from the sky in a storm. "You're hurt," he said, his own voice rough. "You've crashed. I need to call an ambulance." No, the word was soft but absolute. She tried to sit up, and a wave of pain crossed her face. She looked at her own hand, turning it over as if it were a tool she didn't fully understand. "No external communication. It is not safe. For you." The way she said "for you" struck him. She was the one lying in the mud, but she was warning him. The flashlight beam shook in his hand. He looked up at the churning black sky. No sirens. No voices shouting. Just the pounding rain. Whatever had happened, it was a secret between him, her, and the storm. He was a man who fixed broken things. He was a man who lived in silence. The logical thing was to call the authorities. But her eyes held his. Those star-flecked eyes held no threat, only a vast, weary pain and a silent plea. "Can you walk?" he heard himself ask. She nodded slowly. He put the flashlight down, hooked her arm over his shoulders and helped her stand. She was lighter than he expected. She leaned on him heavily. Together, they stumbled out of the flower bed and toward the warm, yellow light of his open door. They left a trail of mud and crushed chrysanthemums. He brought her into the small living room, away from the windows, and helped her sit on the old couch. She was shivering now from cold or shock. He fetched a blanket and draped it around her shoulders. In the steady indoor light, she looked less like a statue and more like a lost, very tired woman. But the strange, cosmic sparkle in her eyes remained. "My name is Min Su," he said, kneeling in front of her. She looked around the room, her gaze moving over the shelves of books, the simple furniture, the tools on his work table. Her eyes finally returned to him. "I am Hanul," she said. She pulled the blanket tighter. "Thank you, Minsu. The storm, it provided cover. But it will not last. They will look when the sky is clear." He didn't ask who they were. The weight of the night, the silent crash, the look in her eyes. It was enough. He had stepped out of his quiet life and into a different story. "You can stay here tonight," he said. It was all he could offer. "You're safe here." Hanul looked at him for a long moment, as if measuring the truth of his words. She gave a small, slow nod. Sanctuary, for now, had been granted. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away all traces of their path from the garden. The first light of morning came gray and quiet. The storm had passed. Minsu woke up on the living room floor, a blanket around him. He had given Hanul the couch. For a moment he thought he had dreamed it all. Then he heard the soft sound of breathing from across the room. He sat up slowly. Hanul was awake. She was sitting perfectly still, the blanket around her shoulders. She was looking out the window at the wet garden. Her eyes tracked a bird flying from the persimmon tree. The way she watched it was intense, like she was studying every feather. "Good morning," Minsu said, his voice rough from sleep. She turned her head. The star-like flecks in her eyes caught the dim light. "Good morning. The atmospheric disturbance has ceased. The air is clear." Her words were correct, but the way she said them was like a weather report. He stood up, his body stiff. "Are you hungry? I can make some rice and soup. I do not require sustenance in the way you might think," she said. But then her stomach made a very human, soft, gurgling sound. She looked down, a faint look of surprise on her face. "Although, this form has needs." "Yes. Thank you." In the small kitchen, Minsu moved quietly. He cooked a simple breakfast: rice, a light seaweed soup, some leftover kimchi. Hanul watched everything. She watched the gas flame turn blue. She watched the rice steam. She listened to the click of the spoon against the pot. He set 2 bowls on the low table in the living room. She sat on the floor across from him, mirroring his position. She picked up her spoon carefully, as if it were a delicate tool. She took a small sip of the soup. Her eyes widened slightly. She took another sip, then another. She ate neatly, but with a focused speed that told him she was, in fact, very hungry. "This is warmth," she said softly, not looking at him. "It is a different warmth from a star. So small but direct." After eating, she seemed stronger. "I must assess the damage to me," she said. "My external layer is intact, but the internal systems are in low power mode. I need time to heal." Minsu nodded. He didn't understand, but he understood healing. "You can use the spare room. The small, but it's private. No one comes here except me." He showed her the room. It was simple. A bed, a small desk, a window looking out at the side wall. She walked in and stood in the center. She placed a hand on the wall, then on the wooden desk. She was listening, or feeling, for something. "This will be sufficient," she said. "The materials are dense. They will help." Days settled into a strange new routine. Minsu would work in his bookbinding workshop. Hanul would often sit silently in the corner, watching his hands. He explained what he was doing, not because he thought she cared, but to fill the quiet. He talked about paper grain, about animal glue, about the importance of a sharp blade point. One afternoon, he was repairing a water-damaged novel. A page was torn. He applied a tiny bit of glue with a thin brush. Hanul leaned closer. "You are connecting broken memory," she stated. He paused. "I suppose I am. Fixing the story so it can be read again. We have something similar," she said, her voice distant. "We repair streams of light, fractured data from old stars. The principle is not so different." It was the first thing she had volunteered about her own world. Sometimes, she would go into the garden. She wouldn't walk around. She would just stand in one spot, barefoot in the grass, her face turned up to the sky. She would stand so still that birds would land near her. Minsu watched her from the window. She looked less like a lost woman then, and more like a strange, beautiful tree that had always been there. A week after her arrival, his friend Ji-hoon called. Minsu answered, his heart beating fast. "Minsu, you're still alive. I haven't heard from you," Ji-hoon said, his voice cheerful. "I've been busy." "Work," Minsu said, watching Hanul through the doorway. She was carefully tracing the lines on her own palm with a finger. "Working on what? You sound different. Less gloomy." Minsu forced a laugh. "Just a big project. An old manuscript." They talked for a few more minutes. When he hung up, he felt a pang of guilt. He had never kept secrets from Ji-hoon. But he looked at Hanul, sitting in a patch of sunlight, and knew he could not tell. This secret was not his alone. That evening, he was sanding a piece of leather. Hanul was sitting across from him. The silence was comfortable. "Hanul," he asked, the question that had been burning in him finally coming out. "What are you? Where are you from?" She was quiet for a long time. "I am from a place very far away. My people are called Lyrians. We are observers. We listen to the music the universe makes. Light, gravity, magnetism. It is a song. My vessel was damaged. I was coming here to listen to a very old, quiet part of the song that echoes near your planet. But others were listening for me. They do not like observers. They are hunters. They silence the song." She spoke without drama, as if explaining why it might rain. Minsu put down his sanding block. He thought of her standing in the garden, so still. She wasn't just looking at the sky. She was listening to it. "You're not safe here, are you?" he said. "Even now. Nowhere is completely safe," she said. "But here, the song of your world is loud. The hum of electricity, the pulse of radio waves, the rustle of life. It is a noisy place. For now, it is a good place to hide." She looked directly at him, her starry eyes holding his. "You are a quiet place within the noise, Minsu. That is the best hiding place of all." He didn't know what to say. He was just a bookbinder with a quiet life. But to her, his quiet was a shield. He simply nodded and went back to smoothing the leather, his hands steadier than he felt. The weeks turned into a month. A new kind of normal took root in the small house. Hanul stopped being just a guest. She became a part of the daily rhythm. Minsu noticed she learned not just by watching, but by doing. He came into the kitchen one morning to find she had made tea. The pot was too full and the leaves were floating everywhere. But the water was hot. She looked at him, waiting. "It's perfect," he said, and poured 2 cups. She began to help in the workshop. Her hands, at first clumsy, became precise. She learned to fold paper with sharp, clean edges. She could hold a book block perfectly still while he sewed it. She never tired of the textures. She would run her fingers over different papers. Rough, smooth, thick, thin. With her eyes closed, a small smile on her lips. "Each one has a different song," she explained one day. "The old ones whisper. The new ones crackle." Minsu found himself talking more. He told her about his parents, who had owned a small stationery shop. He told her how the quiet after they died was so loud it hurt, and how fixing books made the quiet feel useful. She listened without pity, which he liked. She just nodded, as if storing the information in a careful place. One afternoon, Ji-hoon showed up unannounced. Minsu heard the car pull up and his heart jumped into his throat. Hanul was in the garden. "Quick," he said to her, his voice low. "Inside. Don't come out." She moved without a sound, slipping through the back door just as the front gate bell chimed. Min-soo wiped his hands on his apron and went to answer. Ji-hoon, this is a surprise. You never come to the city anymore. I had to bring the city to you, Ji-hoon said, holding up a bag of pastries. He walked in, his eyes curious. So, what's this big project? As Min-soo made tea in the kitchen, Ji-hoon wandered into the workshop. Min-soo watched him, tense. Ji-hoon looked at the two workstations, the 2 cups of half-finished tea sitting side by side. You have a helper? Ji-hoon asked, his tone light but probing. Just a temporary one, Min-soo said, bringing in the tea. A student, learning the craft. Very quiet. She's not here today. The lie felt heavy in his mouth. Ji-hoon accepted the tea. He was quiet for a moment. You seem better, Min-soo. Less folded in on yourself. He smiled. Maybe this student is a good influence. After Ji-hoon left, Min-soo let out a long breath. He found Hanul in the spare room, sitting perfectly still in the dark. I am sorry, she said. My presence complicates your song. It's okay, he said, and he realized it was. The complication, the fear, it was worth it. He's a good friend. He just doesn't need to know about this part of my life. She came out and they resumed their day. But the incident changed something. The outside world had brushed too close. That night, after a dinner of simple noodles, they sat in the living room. A soft rain began to fall, like the night she arrived. Min-soo was reading. Hanul was looking at the droplets tracing paths down the window. On my world, she said softly, not turning from the window. We do not have water that falls like this. We have mists that rise. This falling, it feels like forgiveness. He put his book down. The air in the room felt thick. Min-soo, she said. Her voice was different, small. She finally turned to look at him. Her star-flecked eyes held a vulnerability he had never seen. She pulled the blanket she was wearing tighter around her shoulders. The night is cold. This form does not regulate temperature well when I am tired. She paused, choosing her words with care. She looked at the floor, then back at him. Is there space in your bed? The question hung in the air. It was not a bold or romantic question. It was practical, lonely, and full of a simple human need for warmth. She was not asking for anything else. Just to not be alone in the dark, in the cold. To be near the one steady, quiet point in her chaotic world. Min-soo's breath caught. He understood. She was not just cold. She was scared. The close call with Ji-hoon had reminded them both how fragile her safety was. She was seeking shelter, not in a room, but in the shared warmth of another living soul. He looked at her. This strange, beautiful creature from the stars who loved the sound of paper and the taste of seaweed soup. He thought of her standing in the rain, listening to a universe he could not hear. He thought of the empty, quiet years before her, and the vivid, complicated days since he did not just offer her the other side of his mattress. He saw the whole path ahead in that moment. The hiding, the danger, the beautiful, impossible strangeness of it all. And he knew, with a calm certainty, that he did not want it to be temporary. He met her gaze. His voice was quiet, but clear in the silent room. What if you stayed forever? Her eyes widened. The points of light within them seemed to shimmer. The question was too big. It was an answer to a question she had not asked. It was not an invitation for a night. It was an offer of a life. A human life with all its limits and wonders. She did not speak. She just looked at him, as if trying to read the truth in the lines of his face. The only sound was the gentle, forgiving rain on the roof. The rain kept falling. The words hung between them in the quiet room. Min-soo felt a sudden fear. Had he said too much? Had he frightened her? He had not planned to say it. The question had just come out, true and final, like the last stitch in a binding. Hanul did not move. Her expression was unreadable. The starflecks in her eyes seemed to swirl slowly, like leaves in a pond. Forever, she repeated. The word sounded strange in her voice. It was a big word, a human word, full of a promise that time would not change things. For her, time was a different thing. That is a long time to offer a refugee. It's not an offer to a refugee, Minsu said softly. His courage was growing. It's an offer to Hanul, the one who fixes paper with me, the one who listens to the rain. She looked down at her hands, folded in her lap. My presence is a danger. Forever would mean forever hiding, forever listening for sounds you cannot hear, forever waiting for the sky to find me. I know, he said. I have been hiding too, just from different things. He meant his grief, his quiet loneliness. Maybe we can stop waiting. Maybe we can just live, however long that is. She was silent for a long time. Finally, she stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the dark, wet garden. Her reflection was pale in the glass. On my world, she said, her voice a low murmur. Connections are different. We are linked by the song. We understand, but we do not choose like this. This is a choice of gravity. To fall toward one single point and stay. She turned to face him. I choose your gravity, Minsu. It was not a loud declaration. It was a simple statement of fact. But it changed everything in the room. The space between them was no longer filled with questions. It was filled with a new and fragile understanding. That night, she did not go to the spare room. She followed him to his simple bedroom. It was small, with a low bed and a large window. They did not speak. They just lay down together under the covers, back to back at first, careful and stiff. The storm had made the air cool. Slowly, the shared warmth seeped through the sheets. After a while, Minsu felt her shift. She turned over. Then he felt her hand, tentative and cool, touch his shoulder. He turned to face her. In the dark, he could barely see her, just the outline of her face and the faint, slow shimmer in her eyes. He reached out and found her hand. Their fingers laced together. It was an anchor, promise. They slept. The morning brought a new world. There was no awkwardness. There was a quiet calm. When they made breakfast, their movements around the small kitchen were in sync. He would reach for a bowl, and she would already be passing it to him. It was as if their decision had tuned them to the same silent frequency. Life did not become a grand adventure. It became more real. Hanul began to learn the small things. She learned to do the laundry, frowning in concentration at the washing machine's buttons. She learned to shop at the local market with him, her eyes wide at the colors of the vegetables and the noise of the people. She always stayed close to his side. Point one day, she asked for a notebook. He gave her a simple, empty one. She began to draw. Not pictures of space or ships, but of things around her. A detailed sketch of the persimmon tree's bark, the pattern of the cracks in the old teacup, the way the light fell across Minsu's hands as he worked. Her drawings were precise and full of a deep, observing love. She also started to talk more about her home. Not about danger, but about beauty. She described oceans of slow-moving light, mountains that sang low, deep notes when the wind passed through crystal caves. She told him about archives that were not books, but captured pulses of energy from dying stars, telling their last stories. And this, she said once, holding up a repaired children's book with a bright cover, this is just as important. This is a star that was born in someone's mind. You are saving it too. Minsu realized he was no longer just hiding her. They were building something, a tiny, secret world of their own making. It was built on book glue and shared tea, on whispered stories in the dark and holding hands under the blanket. It was a forever that was measured not in centuries, but in the quiet rhythm of their days. It was the most real thing he had ever known. The quiet forever they were building felt solid, like a well-made book. Seasons changed. The chrysanthemums in the garden bloomed again, covering the scar of Hanul's arrival. She had become part of the neighborhood in small, invisible ways. She would bow to old Mrs. Park next door when they saw her. She put the recycling out on the right days. To the outside world, she was just Minsu's quiet, perhaps shy wife. He had introduced her that way once to a mailman, and the word had felt both like a lie and the truest thing he had ever said. Her true self was for him alone. It was their secret hoard. One evening they were in the workshop. The air was warm. A single lamp lit the table where Minsu was working. Hanul had been very still for a long time, just watching him. "I want to show you something," she said softly. "My other song. The one this body holds." He put down his bone folder. "You don't have to." "I want to," she said. "You have shared your world with me. I want to share mine with you. But you must promise not to be afraid." He nodded. "I promise." She stood up and moved to the open space in the middle of the room. She closed her eyes. For a moment nothing happened. Then, the air around her began to shimmer, like heat rising from asphalt. The light from the lamp bent and twisted. A soft sound filled the room, a hum that was not a sound but a feeling in his teeth and bones. Hanul's form dissolved. But she did not become a large, monstrous dragon. The light coalesced into something else. It was a serpentine shape, long and graceful, about the size of a large cat. It was made of swirling patterns of light, deep blues, silvers, and touches of gold that were the flecks from her eyes. She had no wings. She moved through the air with a gentle, floating motion, like a streamer in water. This was her. This was Hanul. The being of light drifted toward him. He held out a hand, palm up. She curled her luminous form into his lap. She had no weight, but he felt a gentle warmth and a soft, vibrating energy. It made the hairs on his arms stand up. The pages of an open book on the table fluttered gently. As if in a breeze, he carefully moved a hand to stroke the space where her head might be. His fingers met not scales, but a soothing, buzzing warmth. A feeling of pure contentment, not his own, washed over him. She was sharing her emotion directly. "You're beautiful," he whispered. The shape glowed a little brighter. Then, the light shimmered again, and the human Hanul was back, curled in his lap, her head against his chest. She was breathing a little heavily. "It takes energy," she said, "to hold that song outside. But it is my truest shape." From then on, this became their most private ritual. Sometimes, on quiet nights, she would show him her light. She would curl around his shoulders as he read. Or they would sit in the dark garden, and her gentle glow would light up the petals of the flowers from within. Their hoard was these moments. Her light in his hands, the shared silence, the secret beauty of it. But the universe had not forgotten them. It started with the news. Reports of strange, localized magnetic disturbances over the ocean. Pilots complaining about brief instrument failure. Scientists called them rare atmospheric events. Hanul watched these reports on the small television, her face pale and still. "They are looking," she said one evening, her voice flat. "They use broad scans. They hunt for echoes of our song. They are the Kfor. They are cleaners. They silence what they do not understand." The fear came back, cold and quiet. Minsu started watching the sky. He saw more planes higher up, moving in grid patterns. They were just commercial flights, he told himself. But he wasn't sure. The forever they were building began to feel thin, like paper held up to a bright light. Hanul became more distracted. She would stop in the middle of a task, her head tilted as if listening to a distant siren only she could hear. One night, she woke him. Her hand was cold on his arm. Her eyes were wide open, reflecting the moonlight. "They are here," she breathed. "A tracker, a silent blade in the high dark. It is listening very carefully now. The scan is like a net. Soon, it will feel the echo of my repair. The small song I make just by being alive." Minsu sat up, his heart pounding. "What do? We can run." She shook her head. "Running makes a different sound. It would hear it." She looked at him, and her fear was suddenly gone, replaced by a terrible calm. "To stay forever, I must fight for it. I must make a sound so loud it deafens their net." "How?" he asked, dread coiling in his stomach. She touched his face. Her fingers were trembling, but her voice was steady. "I must use all my song, not to hide but to shout. I will make a light that looks like a star's anger. It will burn their ears and blind their eyes. It will lead them away from this point, from you." He understood then. It was not a battle of claws and fire. It was a battle of signals. A trick of light and energy. But the cost? What will it do to you? He whispered. She smiled, a small, sad thing. This form is a vessel for the song. To shout that loud, I will break the vessel. I will not be able to leave this world's gravity again. The path to the stars will close. She took his hand and pressed it to her chest, over her human heart. I choose this gravity, Minsu. I choose our forever, even if it is smaller. But I must choose it now, or we will have no forever at all. The calm in Hanul's voice was more frightening than panic. Minsu wanted to argue, to find another way. But he saw the look in her star-flecked eyes. This was not a suggestion. It was a plan. The only one they had. Where? Was all he could ask. The sea, she said, already moving. A wide, empty space. The water will reflect and confuse. It must look like a natural event from above. She pulled on a dark jacket. We must go to the high cliffs. The ones west of the city. They drove in silence through the sleeping night. Minsu's old car felt tiny under the vast, star-dusted sky. Hanul sat perfectly straight, her head leaned back against the seat. She was not looking at the road. Her eyes were closed, but he knew she was listening, tracing the path of the silent hunter orbiting far above them. After an hour, they left the main road. They bumped along a rough path until the land ended. Minsu parked. Before them was nothing but blackness and the sound of the ocean crashing against rocks far below. The wind was cold and strong, pulling at their clothes. Hanul walked to the very edge of the cliff. The salt spray misted the air. She turned to him. In the moonlight, she looked like a statue again, but one carved from pure will. You must stay back, she said. The energy will be bright. Do not look directly at me when it begins. Hanuel, he started, his voice breaking. She stepped close and kissed him. It was firm and sure, a seal on their promise. Forever, she whispered against his lips. Then she turned and walked 10 more paces away. She faced the endless black of the ocean and spread her arms. She took a deep breath, and then her human shape dissolved. This time, it was not the gentle, cat-sized serpent of light. The energy that erupted from her was violent and raw. It was a pillar of swirling, brilliant plasma that shot up from the cliff into the sky. It made no sound, but Minsu felt a pressure in his ears, a vibration that shook his very bones. The light was blinding. He threw an arm over his eyes, peeking through his fingers. Hanul was the heart of the storm. She was not a shape anymore, but a furious, beautiful nexus of power. Bolts of sapphire and silver energy arced out from her core, licking at the clouds. The ocean below churned, lit up from within like a vast swimming pool of blue fire. Above, the sky reacted. A point of hard, red light appeared. High up, it was the tracker. It began to move, not towards them, but away, speeding over the sea, chasing the colossal electromagnetic ghost she had become. She was shouting with every ounce of her being. Shouting, "Here I am. Come and get me," in a language of pure force. It was a siren song the hunter could not resist. It was pulling the danger away from their home. From him, Minsu watched, tears streaming down his face, whipped away by the wind. He wasn't crying from fear, but from awe. This was her. Not just the quiet woman in his kitchen, but the archivist of cosmic songs, the listener, now using her own voice in one final, devastating performance to save their small, quiet life. The light show reached its peak. A ring of white energy exploded outwards from her position, silent and swift, rolling across the sky. For a moment, the night was as bright as a cloudy day. Then, everything collapsed. The light snapped out. The pressure vanished. The sudden silence was deafening. Minsu stumbled forward. Hanul! He found her on the ground, human again. She was on her hands and knees, gasping. Her skin was pale and she was shaking violently. He dropped to his knees and gathered her into his arms. She was icy cold. "It is done," she choked out, her voice a ragged whisper. "The net is torn. They will follow the echo out into the void. They think I jumped. She looked up at him, utterly drained. The starflecks in her eyes were dim, like embers. The vessel is broken, Minsu. I cannot sing that song again. I am grounded. He held her tighter, rocking her as the wind howled around them. In the distance, over the sea, the strange red light winked out, vanishing into the deeper dark. The sky was empty, just the moon and the stars, ignorant of the battle that had just been fought. That he helped her to her feet, half carrying her back to the car. She leaned her head against the window, completely spent. As he drove back towards the city, the first reports began to crackle over the car radio. Spectacular aurora witnessed over the West Sea. Scientists confirm an unprecedented solar flare interaction with Earth's magnetic field. No cause for alarm. Minsu reached over and took her cold hand. She laced her weak fingers with his. They had done it. They had fought for their forever. But as he looked at her, so frail and human in the passenger seat, he knew the cost. The path to the stars was closed. Her universe had shrunk to the size of a planet, a country, a house. She had traded the symphony of the cosmos for the simple, quiet melody of a life with him. He brought her home as the first hint of dawn colored the sky. He helped her into bed, covering her with every blanket they owned. He made sweet tea and helped her drink it. She fell into a deep, motionless sleep. He sat on the floor beside the bed, holding her hand, watching the slow, steady rise and fall of her breath. She was here. She had stayed. The war was over, and they had won the only thing that mattered. The next quiet morning, together. Hanul slept for 2 days. Minsu stayed by her side, bringing water and simple broth. She would wake, drink, and then fall back into a deep, healing stillness. On the 3rd morning, she opened her eyes and the starflecks were still there, but they were soft now, like distant candles. She smiled at him, a real smile, tired but peaceful. "The noise is gone," she whispered. "The sky is quiet, just weather and satellites. It is just a sky now." The event over the sea was big news for a week. Then it was forgotten. A fascinating natural mystery. Life moved on. So did they, but not back to the old house on the outskirts of Seoul. Felt too much like a hiding place. They had fought for more than that. They moved to a small coastal town. The air smelled of salt and fish. The sound of the waves was constant. Minsu used his savings to open a tiny shop. He called it Slow Bind Books. He repaired and sold old books. Hanul did not work with him in the open. At first, she just sat in the back room, regaining her strength, looking out at the sea. One day, a local man brought in a water-damaged family Bible. It was very old, the pages stuck together, the ink blurred. Minsu shook his head. "This is very difficult. The paper is like lace. I can try, but..." Hanul came out from the back. "May I see?" she asked softly. The man nodded. Hanul took the book. She did not open it. She held it gently in her palms for a long minute, her eyes half closed. She felt the history in the paper, the shape of the damage, the ghost of the ink. "I can feel the words," she murmured. "They are still there." She spent a week on it, working only when the shop was closed. She did not use normal tools. She used her own sensitivity, her delicate touch. She listened to the paper, separating each page with a patience that seemed endless. When she was done, the book was not new, but it was whole. The pages were separate, the text readable. It was a miracle of care. The man cried when he saw it. Word spread, not of anything strange, but of a woman in the bookshop with a magic touch for saving the unsavable. Soon, people brought her damaged paintings, torn maps, faded letters from the war. She could not do her cosmic work anymore, but she could mend the fragile memories of this one small world. They built a life, a real one. They rented a little house with a view of the water. Minsu made breakfast. Hanul learned to love coffee. They shopped at the fish market on Sundays. They had dinner with Minsu's sister, Sujin, who adored Hanul's quiet kindness and never asked about her past. Sometimes, on clear, calm nights, they would walk on the beach, Hanul would look up. The longing in her face was not for escape, but for understanding. She would point to a bright star. That one, she would say. We called it the listening stone. Its light is 10,000 years old. By now, my people may have moved on from its song. Minsu would squeeze her hand. Does it make you sad? To be stuck here? She would think about it. Then she would look at him, the starlight reflected in her ordinary human eyes. No, she would say. I am not stuck. I am rooted. There is a difference. The tree does not miss the seed. It loves the sun and the soil it has. She would lean her head on his shoulder. You are my sun and my soil, Minsu. Their forever was not a fairy tale. They had arguments about leaving dishes in the sink, about Hanul working too late on a fragile scroll, about Minsu being too quiet sometimes. They had bills and worries and rainy days that felt long. But they also had their hoard. It was not gold or jewels. It was a seashell from their first walk on this beach. It was the terrible, lopsided mug Hanul made for him in a pottery class. It was the comfortable silence between them in the evenings, him reading, her drawing the flowers on their small patio. It was the warm space in their bed, where no one was cold or alone. One afternoon, years later, a young couple came into the shop. They had a wedding album that had been in a flood. The photos were stuck, the colors bleeding. They were heartbroken. Hanul took the album and promised to try. That evening, Minsu found her in the back room, the album open before her. She was not working. She was just looking at a picture where the faces were blurred into soft ghosts of color. A single tear traced down her cheek. He sat beside her. What's wrong? Nothing is wrong, she said, wiping her cheek. I was just thinking. I used to listen to the songs of dying stars. I thought that was the most important thing, to preserve the grand, fading stories of the universe. She touched the ruined wedding photo with a tender finger. But this is a universe too. This love, this day, this memory. It is smaller, but it is not less. Saving this, it is the same song, just in a quieter key. She looked at him, and her love for him, for their life, was as vast and deep as any ocean. I did not lose my purpose. I found it. Minsu put his arm around her. Outside, the sun was setting over the sea, painting the water in colors of fire and gold. The dragon woman, who had asked for space in his bed, had built a home in his life. She had traded the infinite sky for a finite, cherished view. And in the quiet, mending rhythm of their days, in the warmth of their shared gravity, they had their answer. Yes, there was space. And yes, she stayed. Forever.